welcome to the Rachel Holmes Lifestyle Show. I am so excited about this edition. This is a special health edition, and I will be interviewing Mira Dessy. Now, I met Mira a few months ago at a special conference in San Diego, and I was thrilled when she gave me her copy of her book. This is the Pantry Principle, and it really dives in deep to the ingredients in the food that we are eating. Now, in this interview, we really dive in deep. We talk about organic food. We talk about what's in our supermarket foods and labeling and ingredients. We look at produce and where it has been grown and where it has come from, and pesticides. We talk cookware and the best oils to actually cook your food in. It's a fascinating interview. And for any Kickstarters or anyone that is health conscious, I highly recommend Mira's book. It's fabulous. All the details will be at the end, but get a pen and paper. Note down some of these really interesting comments and ideas that Mira has, and I know you're going to love this interview. So stay till the end, and remember, if you like this video, please share it, please subscribe, and let me know what you think. Mira, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rachel. How are you?
Fantastic. And I have a fabulous copy of your book, which you kindly gave me at the Mindshare event, which we were in San Diego in August.
Yeah.
It was a fabulous event. Fantastic to meet you. So Mira, tell me a little bit about your story. How did and what inspired you to write such an exciting book? Tell me about that.
Well, you know, funny enough, I used to be in a totally different career. I was in computers. I was a database administrator. And then over time, I started to not feel well, and I got sick, and I wound up feeling worse and worse. It became a downward spiral for me. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, in all of this, the most unfortunate thing is that I began to amass a collection of doctors and a bundle of prescriptions, and nobody ever talked to me about my food.
Really?
Yeah, it was terrible. You know, they all just kept saying, oh, here, take this pill. Oh, go see this doctor. I had a rheumatologist, an endocrinologist, a cardiologist, like all these different doctand
what were your symptoms, Mira, at the time? What was you experiencing?
So I had a lot of fatigue. And I was a mom with 3 girls at home. I had no energy to take care of them. I began to spend more and more of my life on the sofa. I also began to have more digestive issues, and I'll sort of shortcut the story to tell you I eventually wound up being diagnosed primarily with ulcerative colitis, which means ulcers inside the colon. And so I had all kinds of embarrassing things going on. I had bloating and diarrhea and all of that. And then I also began to have a lot of body pain. Right. So there were all these different things going on. Nobody could put their finger on it. Nobody could tell me specifically what it was. Mm-hmm. And at one point, I wound up leaving my job. I was living my life on the sofa. I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs. If I was going to bed, I had to walk upstairs, lie down on the floor, and recover until I could walk to bed. It was terrible. And I eventually realized that this was not going to work for me anymore. And I talk about it a little bit in the book, but essentially by advocating for myself, I wound up getting a thorough checkup that still didn't talk to me about my food and didn't make major changes, but made me realize that I needed to be a more active participant in my own healthcare. And I began to do my own research. I began to realize that I had been eating all of these ingredients. I thought I ate a healthy diet. I thought I was doing well, but I was eating these ingredients that for my body were really toxic. Yeah. And the more I began to cut those things out of my diet, the healthier I got. And all of a sudden, my energy started to come back. And, you know, and you can also see, like, I have a lot of hair. I had been losing my hair. My hair started growing back. My skin started getting better. Like, all of these wonderful things happened. Yeah. And so I began to study more, learn more. And at a certain point, you know, I realized I kind of taught myself everything I thought I could. I turned to my husband. I said, I have to go back to school. Yeah. And I went back to school. I became a nutrition educator, and then began helping people. Like, I changed careers completely to help people do that. And from there, began to help people clean out their pantries and help them look at what was in their food. And it's kind of funny because as I was doing that, I kept going, I wish there was a book about this. There's no book. Like, I'm giving everybody the same handouts. I'm telling everybody the same information. And then one day I went, oh, there's no book. And so I wrote the book.
Absolutely. So where do you start, Mary, when someone comes to you, with ill health for whatever reason, and where do they start with their food? Where do they start in their pantry? And how, what's the first steps?
The first thing actually is to look at, I have people do a food journal, and I have them write down what they're eating, because a lot of people think that they're eating a healthy diet because they're not looking at that deeper level. They're not looking at what's actually in their food. And so if you can start with that, and then you begin to look at what are their complaints, what's going on for them, and then we start to look at how to clean up the diet. And one of the things that I do is I remind everybody, this is a process. This is not something that is going to fix overnight. I did not become the ingredient guru in 30 days, And so we have to figure out, what can you do? What's important to you, and what's something you can start with? So if it's a family, for example, that's got a child who has ADD or ADHD, we're going to start by cleaning the petrochemical ingredients out of that family's home, because those are very bad for that particular child. If it's someone who has migraines, we're going to look at MSG and other ingredients that cause migraines and get rid of those first. Yeah. If it's digestive disorders, whatever it is, we start with those things, and then from there, they start to feel so good. They're like, what else is in my diet? What else can I get rid of? And then they get angry, and they go, why is this in my food? And and then it's just a matter of slow and steady baby changes, a little bit at a time, but making consistent effort. And eventually, months down the road, they look back and they go, I can't believe I used to eat that way.
Absolutely. So mainly, it's not just processed food. It's not just canned food. It's not microwave food. Most people probably watching this video will probably think, well, I eat a healthy diet. I don't microwave my food, and I don't have grains, and I've given up boxed cereals, but they're still not feeling well. So, what would be the next layer from giving up the processed food? What's kind of the next one and beyond?
Sure. One of the things that happens is a lot of people, and, it's been a while since I've been over to England, so I don't really remember how your grocery stores are set up. But here in America, you walk in usually to the produce section, and maybe the flowers are there too. And then you go around, and there's the meat counter, and then there's the dairy section. And so if it's the same way, and a lot of people go, oh, I just shop on the perimeter because that's where all the healthy stuff is. And I'm here to tell you, the perimeter is not as healthy as you think it is. Yeah. Because, for example, someone who's really tired, really fatigued, maybe having a hard time shifting weight or whatever, maybe they're getting a lot of hormones and adding antibiotics and things like that in their food. Well, that chicken doesn't come with very much information on that ingredient panel. And so you have to look at, how was it raised? You have to look at what is in that milk, and you have to learn how to read those labels. With your produce, what are the pesticides that it was exposed to? How was it raised? How was it grown? What's going on with that? And then also to be aware of the fact that even though we think we eat a healthy diet, manufacturers and grocery store producers, they spend tens of millions of dollars every year to figure out how to convince you to buy something else, because they're in the business of making money. And so now you start seeing products creeping in to the perimeter. So next to the strawberries, there's canned whipped cream, or there's artificial sponge cake. And you don't think about it because you think, I'm buying strawberries, but I'm going to make a strawberry shortcake while I'm at it. And you're throwing these other things into your cart. It's very, very, sneaky how they do that.
Isn't it? Very clever, psychological.
Yeah.
Really, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about your groceries and your organic? Is it worth the money spending? Because in the UK, organic seems to be now really taking off. All the main supermarkets, whereas it was always a very minute part of the supermarkets and the grocery stores or specialist stores or farm shops. Now it seems like the big supermarkets, Walmart, Asda, etc., they are now really jumping on the organic, and that is exploding on the perimeter aisles. Is it worth the extra expense? What is the difference between something that's not organic, something that is organic, and what benefits would we get from that?
When it comes to organic, part of the challenge is it is a lot more expensive, and I definitely get that. I think it's very overwhelming for most families to try to afford 100% organic diet. Obviously, that would be the ideal, but we just have a hard time paying for that. It costs a lot. So what you have to do is you start breaking it down and you look at what categories are most important for you and where are you going to get the most bang for your buck. Mm-hmm. So, for example, for a lot of families, especially families that have young children, I am a huge proponent of doing organic for animal products. So you want organic dairy. Now, in England, I don't think you use RBGH, which is recombinant bovine growth hormone. It's a hormone that makes cows give more milk. Over here in the United States, that's huge, and it's so bad for you in so many ways. But we also have, there's high levels of antibiotics that are used in raising animals, and that's for prophylactic reasons. It helps keep them from getting sick when they raise them in confined operations. It also makes them gain weight faster, so they're more profitable. Mm-hmm. The next thing that we look at is genetically modified organisms are things that have been altered in some way. I am hugely against GMO, and so that's something where if you want to make sure that you're avoiding them, we don't have we don't have GMO labeling here in the United States, although we're working on it. Yes. And so you want to be aware of the fact that corn, soy, and canola are 3 ingredients that are hugely contaminated by genetically modified processes, and so you want to get those organic. Yeah. And then there's the dirty dozen, which for the United States, the list is probably different than for Great Britain, but it's the 12 fruits and vegetables that are most likely to be contaminated by pesticides. So that's a huge toxic burden on your body.
Wow, that's a lot.
And yeah, it is. So there's 12, and the list changes every year. It's a moving target. And part of the problem is, yes, you're all the way over there in England, and people may be thinking, well, that doesn't really apply to me. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's a global food economy at this point. And so a lot of things that happen over here are now going over there. And you really have to be aware of where your food comes from, who owns your food, and what are they doing to it.
And you were saying earlier when we were chatting that a lot of the food manufacturers are global, and they are now, maybe US-based companies are now actually purchasing UK and European food manufacturers, so they have an even bigger global reach. Are there any in particular that we kind of need to watch out for?
Here's the thing. There are so many intermingled pieces to the puzzle that what's more important is to learn how to read the label and be aware of what the changes are, because you never know who's going to buy something next. And there's a lot of different manufacturing processes that happen because companies know that it has to be different for the European market than for the American market or for the Australian market or whatever. The challenge is that there are a lot of surreptitious changes that are starting to happen because these companies are finding legal loopholes and legal ways to circumvent what's going on. And it's kind of funny, you mentioned Mindshare, and while we were there, I had the opportunity to talk with someone from the Netherlands, and he was saying how disappointed he is that there are a lot of changes happening to their food that are legal, but that never used to be an issue that had to be regulated because their companies weren't doing it. But now that they're owned by American companies, they are doing it. So they're adding emulsifiers that are not good for you, or preservatives, or other things that never used to be part of the food process over there.
Oh, so you would say to anybody that's suffering from any kind of symptoms, any kind of health issues, whether it's digestive issues, whether it's skin, whether it's migraines, whether it's, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
the first port of call would be to really have a look at the food that you're eating on a daily basis, on a regular basis, and really sort of start there really before you actually do go to your general practitioner or your healthcare provider. That the food would be the first thing to have a really good look at yourself. How does someone become a diet detective? You know, it does seem very overwhelming and very scary, and there's some amazing information in your book that people can follow kind of step by step with labeling, isn't there? But sort of any general tips that you can kind of suggest if someone's watching this video and not feeling great but not sure why?
You know, one of the big things is food journaling. I know I keep talking about that, but if you start writing down what you're eating and how you feel, and you keep track of that, and, you know, and there are a lot of people who go, oh, I'm very mindful of my diet. Well, I'm here to tell you that I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I don't remember what I had for breakfast on Monday. You know, I mean, we really have to write it down, and then we write down how we feel, and we start to look, are there patterns? Are there symptoms? And sometimes it's really funny. Someone will say, gee, I noticed that every time I ate this, within a couple of hours, I felt tired, or my shoulders hurt, or whatever. Like, we begin to see those patterns. But then even more than that, I encourage people to read the book, because it's not necessarily a cover-to-cover book, although a lot of people do read it that way. It then becomes a reference, though, and then you can go back and start looking at things and just figure out what's important to you. Do you want to reduce sugars in your diet? Well, I talk all about that. Do you want to look at healthier fats? I talk about that as well. We're just modifying what we're doing, but we have to remember that we can't do it all at once. You know, I never talk to people and say, go home, throw out everything in your pantry, go shopping with this list and you'll be fine, because that's not sustainable. You just pick one thing and start there, whatever it is.
And I was interested in, you were there's a section in the book about cookware and actually cooking, you know, different kinds of cookware, how important that can be. Is there any tips that you can give anybody? Throw out all the saucepans, go and buy the most expensive sauces.
No, that'd be really nice. My husband might not be too happy about that. Here's the thing. The one thing I encourage everybody to throw out, absolutely, anything with Teflon.
Oh, I'm so happy you were going to say that. I knew
it is ubiquitous. It is on everything. If it says non-stick, chances are very high that it's Teflon, and it's only this year that they have to stop using it in the manufacturing process.
Really? I didn't know.
Yeah, but here's the deal. There's still a whole bunch of pots and pans out there that have it, and it is so bad for you. PFOAs are so bad. They have such a negative impact on the body. And so that is the one thing. And I'm not saying that you have to go out and like everybody go buy Le Creuset or something like that. That'd be nice. Yeah. But get rid of those and buy yourself whatever you can afford that is a clean pan. So I am talking enamel pans. I am talking stainless steel metal pans, copper pans, you know, cast iron if you can afford it. Good quality pans. And then for the other things for cookware, I mean, obviously you and I both know cooking in the microwave is never a good idea. But anytime you want to reheat anything, a lot of people think, oh, I'll just pop it into the micro and I'll zap it for a few seconds. Don't do it in plastic, please. Glass only, because you do not want the plastic melts and warps and off gases, and then it gets in your food and then you're eating that. It's not good for you.
That's frightening. And also, what are the best, you talk about it again in the book in depth, what do you think are the best oils to cook with? And, you know, some oils have a higher smoke point, some are actually carcinogenic, some go rancid at high temperatures. You know, what's your take on, you know, people hear all sorts of things, what they should and shouldn't be cooking with. What do you think is a good tip for somebody?
You know, my three favorite cooking oils are olive oil, ghee, which is clarified butter, and coconut oil. And you use them differently depending on what you're doing with them. Now, there are some others that are very nice, but they're for different purposes. Flax oil, for example, is lovely on a salad, but you can't cook with it because it'll break down too quickly. The big thing that I tell people with oils is to watch out for those genetically modified oils if you're buying something, you know, from a company here. And like I said, American companies, they are knocking hard on the EU's door to try and get GMOs in there. And so I am not a fan of corn oil. I am not a fan of canola oil. I just don't feel that those are healthy for us in the first place. And then above and beyond that, we have the genetic modification, which is not great. The nice thing about using coconut oil, which is a healthy saturated fat, or olive oil, which is a great cooking oil. Actually, it's a great multi-purpose oil. It's good for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Or even ghee, is that those are all easily digestible oils. So your system processes them very readily.
Okay, that's good to know. Really good to know. Any other tips that you can think, i.e., anything with freezing foods? Any tips that you might have for people that want to use freeze food? Is it a good idea, bad idea? Is it always a good idea to eat everything as fresh as you possibly can? What's your thoughts on that?
I actually am a proponent of frozen food if fresh is not available. And part of the reason for that is when we buy frozen foods, and I'm talking frozen like vegetables or fruit. I'm not talking things in sauces or noodles or pastas or that kind of stuff. But if you're buying, for example, frozen Brussels sprouts, they're picked at the peak of ripeness and flash frozen right there. So that's reasonable as long as there's nothing else in the bag but Brussels sprouts. So I'm okay with using those. And I am a huge fan of trying to eat as seasonally as possible, but I also know that there are some times when you want to be able to have access to something, and so it is probably better actually to buy those frozen than fresh out of season, because if you're doing fresh out of season, there's two things that happen. One is they've been picked well before they were ripe, so their nutrient value isn't what it should be. They've been stored in an ethylene gas. Sorry, they've been stored in a compartment so that they won't ripen, and then force ripened with ethylene gas, and then transported wherever it is that they went around the world. So if you're eating strawberries from Chile in December, I'm here to tell you they've been exposed to a lot of chemicals.
Oh, whoa, that's a big eye opener, really. God.
Yeah.
And things like nuts and seeds and coffee, is that all the same? Goes through the same, because they're picked in maybe third world countries, and then they're shipped around the world to the UK. They're obviously held in storage at, I have no idea where. So are they the same? Are they having toxins on them and mold toxins, etc.?
So nuts and seeds hold better, so they actually can't be picked underripe, because then they won't ripen once they've been harvested. Yes, there is the whole issue of air miles and whatever is done to them, but for the most part, what I tell people is buy those raw to the very best of your ability, and then, soak them for an added boost in nutrition. But, it's not the same issue as buying, for example, if you're going to get oranges and they're not in season, they had to sit in a warehouse somewhere and wait, because oranges only grow at a certain time of year. That's when they ripen, and so if we want them out of season, then we're looking at all of those impacts and what it's doing to our food.
Yeah. So I suppose what we're saying here then is just start slowly, getting the obvious toxins and processed food out, and then I suppose it's a level. You go to the next level, then the next level, and then the next level. And as you say, it could take a year, it could take longer. We're looking for a slow, sustainable lifestyle change here, aren't we?
And one of the things that I like to point out to people, especially if you're food journaling, save your food journals, because I promise you, 3 months down the road, I want you to go back and look at the first week. You will be surprised at how much you have changed, because part of what we do when we make those incremental changes, we sort of absorb them into our thought process, into our shopping habits, into our eating habits, and then all of a sudden, when we're forced to look back at it, we go, oh gosh, I can't believe I used to do that. So that's kind of amazing.
Good point. It's such a good point. And that kind of brings me up to, we all want to live, we want to joy in life, and, just the same in the US, food it can be such a joyful experience, sitting around the table with your family, enjoying food with your friends. It's very social, and that kind of leaves us to going out. In the UK, the same as the US, we have a big culture of going out to eat and having really nice times with our friends and families. But you don't know what you're eating. You just don't know. So if it's a chain of restaurants, you know, and a lot of them are the same in the UK as the US, we have no idea where the meats come from or the fishes come from. You know, whether if it's local restaurants, then sometimes you have a little bit more of an idea. You don't know what the food's been cooked in. But it can verge on to becoming that, you know, nobody wants to be obsessive or, you know, it's about balance as well, isn't it? Is there any tips?
Yeah.
And that,
You know, yeah, and here's the thing. So there is a condition, and I do talk about it in the book. It's called orthorexia. And this is where you are so tightly focused on the purity of your food that it becomes an obsession. And you can't eat out, you can't go over to anybody else's house, you can't have anything unless you are in total control, and it becomes very limiting. There are certain things that I believe you should be aware of when you eat out, and there are certain things that you want to be mindful of, but I promise you, if my girlfriend invites me over for dinner, I'm not going to sit there and go, where's that chicken from? Did you cook that in the right oil? And excuse me, but are those vegetables? Like, I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to sit there and have a good meal and enjoy her company. What I tell people is it's not about being perfect. It's about being educated and about making informed choices. You know, more importantly than, being in control of your food is very important. And the more educated you become, the more you begin to look at restaurants and begin to be able to say, I'm not going to go to that place anymore because I know that's really not great. Like, that's really not great. And this one's a mid-level and this one's a higher level for me. Like, there are different ways to make those choices. But more importantly than that is learning how to make some of those healthy shifts when we're beginning to make a healthy lifestyle change when we go out. Learning to say no to the bread basket. Learning to ask for more veggies. Learning how to make different choices. You can still go out to a restaurant, but maybe instead of having it fried, you want it grilled, or maybe you want, different dressings or whatever. Dressings, for example, are a huge issue. You can have a salad that has way more calories than a burger and fries. By the time you add in the candied nuts and the creamy dressing and the, whatever.
Yeah. It's very exciting. We're only on the very top, aren't we? It's the new frontier experience where it comes from. Now, if anybody wants to know more, where can they find your book and where can they find more about you and the work that you do?
So the book is actually available on Amazon. So you just go to Amazon, The Pantry Principle, and get it there. So that's great. And then to connect with me, there is theingredientguru.com is my website. And I share once a week. I have a free newsletter that goes out and it tells you some of the stupid stuff that they're still doing in our food. And I do try to incorporate some of the things that are happening on a global basis as well, or to look at the major food manufacturers, because the web of who owns our food is just huge. And so I keep people up to date on that. And as a matter of fact, if they sign up for the newsletter, they'll get a free copy of my ebook, Eating Out, Eating Healthy.
Oh, brilliant. And what's next for you personally? Where are you going to take your knowledge and your expertise, and what's your plans?
Well, so I have two exciting things going on. One is I am working on a companion volume to The Pantry Principle, taking the conversation a little bit deeper. And then end of this year, beginning of next year, I actually have a book on meditation coming out.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so that'll be very cool.
Really exciting. Good. And everyone can find you on Facebook as well and pop.
Absolutely. Yep, facebook.com/The Ingredient Guru. So that's where I am.
It was really lovely to spend this time with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. It was great to talk with you.